Africa has always interested the world. It interested the world during the days, as we know, of slavery, and we have mentioned that. It interested the world, and that is why there was a scramble for Africa, the whole colonial project, which was initiated and inflicted on Africa after the Berlin Conference in 1884, was about African resources. And always remember that when the European powers were coming, initially they were not interested in the politics of the day. They were interested in the resources. So the British had the British Imperial Company. That is what was trading when they came into Kenya. And that company is what was trading in Gold Coast, in now Ghana. It is the same that was trading in places such as Nigeria, East Africa. The Germans also had their companies. The Belgians who are doing trade, the Italians the same, the French the same, the Dutch the same. So it was about trade and about resources. When Europe was agrarian, you needed agricultural produce. And that is why you saw in many countries they had sisal farms, they had rubber farms, they had coffee farms, they had tea farms, resources. When Europe was now industrializing, you needed resources because the Europeans, in some cases, they had exhausted these resources. You needed uranium, you needed lithium, you needed gold, you needed diamond, you needed iron ore, you needed soda ash. And therefore, all these powers were coming and are still coming to the continent of Africa because of Africa's resources. And the countries were their spheres of influence where they could get these things cheaply. But after the advent of independence, when countries regained their political independence, remember that there was the rise of two powers which were not traditional colonizers. The Soviet Union was never a colonizer, but it rose after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and after the World War II as a world power. The Americans were not colonizers in that sense. Of course, one can say that they had an involvement in Liberia and therefore and the Philippines, but they were not like the European colonizers. They themselves had been colonized. And therefore, when they emerged, they started when they were rebuilding Europe after the World War II, America now became a major industrial power. And why were then they interested in Africa? Once again, it is because of resources. There is nothing that interests the world in Africa other than strategic interests, which are resources, which are natural resources. And the politics is important to them, and political domination is important to them because it helps them access these resources. You'll see, for example, in the 1970s, under the Lomé Convention, the Europeans entered into an arrangement with the Africans for purposes of accessing their markets and their produce. You saw that during the Cotonou Agreement. You've seen that through the AGOA, Africa Growth Opportunity Act, which gives countries preferential treatment. And these are all schemes which are designed by these powers for that purpose. We now have new entrants into the arena, China, which is gobbling anything on sight. China's appetite for resources is insatiable. And it's not only in Africa, you see it in Latin America, but Africa is the place. Look at what they are doing in Congo, how the timber they are getting from Congo and all the natural resources. So Africa finds herself in a place where her resources make her very attractive, and she is continuing to be a supplier of raw materials. So that the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world is an unequal relationship. It's like the relationship between the horse and the rider, Africa being the horse and the riders being China, the United States of America, Turkey, India, Russia sometimes, and all these countries. That must change if Africa is to grow. So that when we talk about trade, it is trade. It is only people who are equals that can engage in proper trade, particularly when you are talking about trade at a national and continental level. So we are attractive, and there is a new scramble for Africa, And that scramble is for Africa's resources. When you see military bases being stationed in Africa, is to control those resources and to ensure that they are the only ones who have a hand in it. And you can see how Djibouti, for example, has become the home of many bases, whether it's Chinese, Americans, and whether it's Russians or Chinese. All these are in Djibouti, and now they are building some bases in Berbera, in Somaliland. They have bases in Ghana, rather not in Ghana, but they have a military presence in Ghana. The British have a military presence here in Kenya. They have a military presence in different parts in Somalia, in Sudan, in the Sahelian region, all because of resources. You know, trade is the lifeblood of human relations throughout the ages. We trade because if you produce maize, I may need it, but you also need onions or tomatoes. Then we trade. And money is a medium in facilitating that trade, because trade is not barter trade in this day and age. Internationally, there have been attempts to create a world order which is fair to all. General Agreement on Tariffs, GATT, which was replaced by the World Trade Organization, is meant to do that internationally. But you and me know that that is not true, because GATT and subsequently WTO is dominated by Western powers, and the rules are unfavorable. And because African countries are small and weak, they are easy to manipulate. They get into unfavorable agreement. That is why we is now being recognized by Africans that in order to trade properly, you've got to do it regionally. If you are in East Africa, you do it through the East African community. If you're in West Africa, you do it through ECOWAS. If you're in Southern Africa, you do it through SADC. And of course, we have organizations such as IGAD. You have organizations such as COMESA, and all these organizations, many of them. And in the context of Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we are now saying that Africa is going to ensure that there is intra-African trade, because intra-African trade is less than 30%. If you go to Europe, it is almost anything between 60 and 70%. In North America, it's possibly also between 60 and 70%. If you go to Asia, anything between 56 and 65%. So Africans don't trade because of a number of things. First of all, the international monetary architecture is based on a dollar, a currency that we don't control. If you look at the many conflicts within Africa, also does not allow for movement of goods in an easy way, the cost of energy, and all those things. And Africa Continental Free Trade Area is created for the purpose of ensuring that trade is given the impetus that it requires and is given the significance that it requires, so that Africa can retain most of our resources. And when she relates with the rest of the world, she does so not from a position of weakness, but from a position of strength. You know, as I've said before, when Mangaliso Subuku was asked in 1960, when people were talking about race, he says, there's only one race in the world, the human race. And we had better learn that quickly. And the faster we do so, the safer we are, everybody. So first, we must look at each other as human beings. We need each other. And once we have recognized that, we must trade from a position of mutual respect and mutual strength. We were wronged many years, and they continue to wrong us. One of the things that I and others are working on right now is reparation. And what makes me happy is that in the recent past, I've seen the French president apologize for colonization and slavery. I've seen the Dutch have also apologized. The Belgians have apologized. I'm waiting for the British to apologize properly. I hope the Spaniards will do so. The Portuguese will do so. The Americans will do so. And all these debts that they claim we owe them, the first step towards reparation is that all debts owed by African countries will be cancelled completely. That is part of the reparation. Once they atone for their sins, then we will know that they mean well. And then we must begin to grow our own capacity to do things. We must make our mobile phones. We must make our computers and laptops. We must make our aeroplanes. We must make our own cars. We must make our own medical equipment. We must feed ourselves. We must make our furniture so that there is competition. You see what is happening in Europe and America. The Europeans are making Airbus. The Americans are making Boeing. The Chinese are making their own plane. The Brazilians are making Embraer. So we must not allow slavery and colonization to be a permanent excuse. We are not the only people who are enslaved or colonized. The Indians were. They are doing good work now. The Chinese were harassed by the Japanese many times, as were the South Koreans, and they are now doing great things. Singapore was colonized. Brazil was colonized. So that is no longer an excuse. We cannot continue to complain. We must now begin to act, and act in a proper manner. And if we do so, then we will compete, because the world is about competition. Nobody is going to give you anything on a silver platter. The sooner we realize that, the safer we are. As they would say in the United States of America, it's time for Africa to smell the coffee. Once we define our foreign policy properly, then we will play our rightful role. That is why some people have been saying, and I agree with them, that there is a need to reform the United Nations organization. This idea of having former colonizers being permanent members and African countries are not permanent members, these are the kind of things that we should eliminate. And you can now begin to see African voices are emerging. We are talking about equality. We are talking about de-dollarizing trade. We are talking about foreign policy, non-interference. This idea that Americans want us to think the way they want us to think, they want us to behave, they want the way they want us to behave, to do things in their manner and style, to choose for us who our enemies and friends are. We must tell them no. You cannot choose for us. You cannot tell us what to do. We are human beings. We know what we want. You cannot choose our friends for us. You cannot choose our enemies for us. We choose what we want to do, and we relate with you from a position of mutual respect. Why do they do that? Military power. All these things you see is because America knows, Europe knows, that they can bomb us to smithereens using their nuclear power. That is why. They are strong because of their military power. That is why the American ambassador in any country feels so confident, because they can bring a warship on the coast of Mombasa and release the tomahawks against us. So we must be strong. If you are weak, even your diplomacy is weak. Your everything is weak. You will be tolerated, but you will not be respected. Africa must lift herself so that she is respected, not tolerated, and not treated like a child in diapers, whose diapers are changed at will, even when they are not soiled. The Pan-African movement is an old movement, and one sees Pan-Africanism in its embryonic stages during the lives of people like Marcus Garvey in Jamaica, through the lives of people like Sylvester Williams, John Hendrick, Lennox Hendrick, W.B. Du Bois, and later we see other Africans in the continent joining, such as Kwame Nkrumah, such as Modibo Keita, Kambarage Nyerere, Obafemi Awolowo, Haile Selassie. And the whole idea about Pan-Africanism in the early days was to decolonize Africa so that Africa and Africans are capable of doing their things in an environment of freedom and choice. Pan-Africanism today must be understood to mean the organization of Africans wherever they are, whether in the continent or in the diaspora, to do things which are in the best interest of Africa in all spheres of life, and to do it from an African perspective. We now use the word Ubuntu to even enrich it, to say recognition of a true Pan-Africanist is the realization that I am because you are, and you are because I am. And that is the spirit of Pan-Africanism. Africans doing things for themselves in an environment of freedom and relating with the rest of the world with dignity and with confidence. It is already having that impact. In fact, the recognition by the African Union and other African bodies that we must have a vision, which is Africa Agenda 2063 and all other things, is informed by Pan-Africanism. That we have relied on others for too long, that we have been abused for too long, that we've been humiliated for too long. And the time is now to stop complaining and mourning and to begin to act. Pan-Africanism is beginning to rise. The giant is beginning to stir. The Titanic is turning. And when it's turning, you may not see its motion, but it's turning slowly but surely. Will it have problems and hurdles? Yes. But those hurdles, let us use them as stepping stones. You know, when I see movies like Wakanda, with due respect to the actors, that is Hollywood's version of what Africa is. That is plastic Africa. That is not real Africa. We must not have an Africa that is made in the image of Hollywood. We must have an Africa that is made in our own image. And I would have loved to see that Africa being created in Nollywood in Nigeria or here in Kenya. So let us not allow Hollywood to define Africa for us. We must define Africa for ourselves through theater and art, and it's being done. When you watch the movies that are made in Nigeria, I feel them. When I see movies made in Tanzania, I feel them. When I see movies made in South Africa, I feel them. When I see some of the movies even being made here in Kenya, I feel them. I can relate to them. Not the razzmatazz that you see in Hollywood movies, complete with artificiality and things that really are in people's imaginations, which is not bad, but they are better not imagined for us. We are capable of imagining. If we take the money that is in Africa that is wasted, in fact, you may wish to know that African countries at one time did actually say that they are going to put 0.25% of their budgets into research. And there is not a single African country that I know that does not have a Ministry of Culture. Not a single one of them. And that is the conduit via which we can make art and theater to thrive. It can be done. It's not a question of lack of funds. It's just a question of lack of prioritization of these things. I mean, if you look at what is generated in Nollywood now, Nollywood is now a multi-billion naira industry. If you look at what is generated through DSTV, that medium, and those is a multi-billion. Look at what is generated through in India, through Bollywood, and even in Hollywood itself that you mentioned. So it is not a question of lack of funds. Money is there, and it can't be found. See, 1.4 billion of us, we say we have no money, and we are eating on a daily basis and producing on a daily basis. There is money. You know, there is a great thinker, I think he was French. As I said before, knowledge knows no boundary, but he's remembered for these, which I'll say in Latin, in which he rendered them, then render it in English. Dubito ego cogito, cogito ego sum. I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. The mind is the standard of the man, to mean the woman also. And all battles must be won in the mind. And that is where they must be fought. Because when you change people's mind, what a man can imagine. Look at the aeroplane, is out of a man's mind. Look at the computer, is out of a man's mind. Look at the equipment we are using here, is out of men's mind. Look at the mobile phone that I can talk to somebody in Shanghai, China, from Nouakchott in Mauritania, and I see his image. That is a man. So once you deal with the mind and deal with the mind positively, there is no limit to what can be done. but the mind is also capable of evil. That is why we must have ethical standards when we are dealing with these things. So Africans must change their attitude. They must recognize that we were born to create and innovate. And when we do so, there is no limit to what we cannot achieve. Africa must be made great. And Africa will only be made great when her sons and daughters choose to serve her in dedication and in dignity. The first place to start in Africa is to remove the curse which holds Africa back. Political leaders who do not love Africa. We must morally rearm and introduce hygiene in African politics. The day we solve our politics, that is the day Africa begins to grow. That is why I hear Kenya's Ngugi wa Thiong'o telling us, decolonize your mind. That is how I hear my good friend Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talking about the mind. That's how I hear Chinua Achebe says that the problem of Africa is simply and squarely one of poor leadership. And there is something we can do about it. And we must do that thing. And that thing is to create an environment that allows good men and women to rise and serve the continent of Africa. Easier said than done, because the crooks will fight it, but fight them we must.